Well, you've done it. You've gone out and bought yourself a Lotus. But now, how do you get it to the track? There's not much you need to do to just go to the track, but there's some things that you can do to make it a more enjoyable experience taking it to the track. The cars are basically under the skin a race car. So as they deliver it from the factory, as long as you've got good tires, fresh brake fluid, good brake pads, the car's a very competent track day car. You're going to have a lot of fun. It's not going to leave you wanting more. It's going to leave you wanting to know more how to drive it. So let's take a look at this car. This particular car is not one that's been particularly prepped to go to the track. It's just been somebody's daily driver, fun weekend car. If we were going to take this car to the track, some of the things I would look at, under the access cover here, we would find the brake fluid. We want to find out, it should have been changed within the last year. Preferably if this is your first time out, you're kind of starting your adventure, fresh brake fluid. Make sure oil change, things like that are good. Then just basic car. If you're not going particularly fast, the stock brake pads will hold up for a light duty track day or two, but you probably want to step up the pads to something a little more aggressive, something that'll take a little more of the heat. Also with the brake pads, make sure you've got enough thickness to survive not only the track day, but also the trip home if you're not trailering. You generally want to have at least 2 or 3 millimeters of pad remaining after the end of your track day. So make sure you've got plenty of pad before you hit the track. The good thing is Lotuses aren't particularly heavy, or they're lightweight cars, so they're not particularly hard on the brake pads. So you can be pretty hard on the brakes on these and they'll have a lot of pad left at the end of the day. Looking at the tires on this car, this is a sport model, so it's got the original AO 48 tires on it. They've got a reasonable amount of tread. That's one of the things you'll want to look at, is make sure you're not going to be cording the tires when you're there. These tires are actually fairly fresh. You can still see some of the casting marks and stuff. Don't let that deceive you though. When you're looking at your tires, these cars aren't always driven a lot of miles per year. And what you may find is that the tire has gone stale. Our compound tires don't store very well. Or if you took a car with older tires, even though they have lots of tread, to the track, you may find that the stick just isn't there. One thing you can look at is there's a DOT number, and in that DOT number is a date code. So this tire was produced the 21st week of 2014. So this tire is actually good. It's a little over a year old, or about a year old, and it wouldn't be brand new fresh, but at least it's stable enough that you can drive on it. I have seen tires that look like this, lots of tread, but be 5 and 6 years old. The two tires that we recommend for street and track use these tires are good, but they heat cycle out. They don't last quite as long as like an R888. R888, you can almost run them down to the cords and they'll stay sticky. And they don't age out over time quite as bad as these. The other tire is the Dunlop Duriza Star Spec. It's a near R compound. It's a little more highway orientated. It's not going to have quite as much grip as this, but what it will do is allow you to get some feedback from the car. You'll hear more as far as tire squeal and noise, and you'll feel a little more rotation in the car, which is good feedback as to how your inputs to the car are. If you're putting too much steering inputs or too rough with the car, it'll start moving around. If you're too late to get to the brakes and you're still in the brakes as you're trying to corner, the car's going to rotate on you. It's better to do that kind of thing at a slower speed with something like the Durizas than to have something like a full racing slick and find out then, because you'll be going much faster and the consequences are much higher. So don't be afraid to start out with a more, less aggressive tire. As you're checking brakes and other things, find out what's going on with the alignment. It's a good idea to get the car into an alignment shop and get a basic idea of what, how's the toe, how's the camber. From the factory, these cars are delivered with basically zero camber in the front. By pulling shims in the front, you can add negative camber, which will give you a little more stick in the front. It'll align the tire to the ground better as the car leans in the corner. If you're just cruising down the highway, you want basically zero camber. But the more you're leaning on the car, the more camber you want to add, depending on what kind of tires you're putting on the car. From the factory, sometimes the toe's a little excessive in the rear, which can make the tire wear a little excessive in the rear. You'll want, with a good alignment on the car, your tires will last much longer, especially the R compound tires. When prepping for the track, you've got to look at your engine, transmission, and the drive mechanicals, and make sure everything's going to be up for snuff. Being as the Elise and Exige are newer cars, generally they hold up pretty well because the mechanicals are fairly new. But you do want to look at how's the coolant, oil, fluids, make sure everything's been changed, it's fresh. But start getting in the habit of looking at hoses and coolant tanks and for oil leaks underneath. Anything that's a sign of trouble that could end your day early. These cars really shouldn't have any fluid leaks. One thing that we've been seeing on these cars as they get to be 10 years and older is the coolant bottles are going bad. This one looks pretty good, but like our buyer inspection video, you may also see that it's scratchable, and that's a sign that it's going to be going out. Track duty puts more pressure on everything. If anything is questionable, just get it done and make sure it's in good shape. Don't overlook things like air filter. The front tire throws a lot of dirt into the air filter box, and even if you're only doing a few track days, you're throwing a lot of dirt up in there, and you may find that you're starting to lose horsepower if you don't have a clean air filter. I would at least look at it when you do your oil changes and just make sure that it's staying clean. Don't forget to look at your battery. Battery's held from the factory with a couple toe brackets. With just the toe brackets on the bottom, the batteries can come loose and bounce around in the trunk, damaging taillights, the clam. I've even seen them hit the engine lid and break the latch loose from the engine lid. You want to either have a lighter weight battery with a bracket on it. With a full-size battery, have a bracket like this that goes up and over the battery that holds it down, and you can't physically move it. It's solidly in place. Check and make sure the clamps are tight. Most organizations are going to want to see the battery terminal on the positive side covered. Make sure you've got the factory one covering it, or tape it, or some other way of covering it that it can't short out. We should probably talk a little bit about seatbelts. Getting started out on the track, a stock Elise seat and the 3-point belts are actually adequate enough to get you out there on the track. If you find that you're going faster and faster, or you want a bit more safety, you can add a harness bar that would go in the back, and you can add either a 4-point or a 5-point harness. One of the benefits of having harnesses is you'll find that you're not holding yourself in the seat as much. The more comfortable and relaxed you are in the car, the more you can concentrate on your driving and car position and just general track experience. Getting started with the lower grip tires, a stock seat will work just fine. But again, as you get going faster and faster, if you're adding shocks or stickier tires, you're going to find that you're kind of moving around in the seat. You may want to start looking at a aftermarket seat that holds you better. Another item on these cars is fuel. These cars have a long fuel tank that is kind of behind the seating area. It's about a 10-gallon tank, long and thin. The fuel pickup is on the driver's side, and works fine if you're making right-hand turns. But if you're making long left-hand turns, like turn 2 at Thunder Hill, you'll find if you're below a half a tank, about 3/4 of the way around that corner, you'll find that all of a sudden you've got fuel starved. So with an unmodified fuel system, most stock cars have, you'll want to keep the tank pretty much full in between each session. At least 3/4 of a tank before you go out. If you're really running hot laps, you can use as much as a half a tank in one session, a 30-minute session. So we've, before we started baffling the fuel tanks, we would fill the tank between each session. It's not a bad idea to have a torque wrench with you at the track so that you can check the wheel torque. About every few track days I hear about somebody lost a wheel at the track, especially if you're doing tire swaps at the track. You'll want to keep an eye on the torque. As a general rule of thumb, we'll torque the wheels twice. Once when we first put them on, tighten them up, torque them, and then after the first session, if anything shifts or as things heat up and cool off, sometimes things will loosen up a little bit, so it's not a bad idea to check them again after that first session. If you take the wheel off to check something, you put it back on, don't forget after the next session, just check it, make sure it's tight.